Okay, ladies and gents, welcome to this tutorial on question 4 for your news question. The question is going to look something like this. It's an evaluative question, so the question will look something like this, we hope. Evaluate the usefulness of one of the following in understanding audiences for online newspapers, such as The Guardian and the Daily Mail, either Gerbner's cultivation theory or Shirky's end of audience theory. So there's a couple of things to mention here before we go any further. Hopefully this wording might be familiar to you. It's exactly the same sort of wording as question 4 from your long-form TV drama question. It also will give you a theorist to think about and ask it to apply it to long-form TV drama. In this case, they're asking you to apply it to the news brands which you have studied. So it's a 10-mark question. It should take you about a quarter of an hour to write. Now, I'm aware that the majority of the work that you've done has been on print newspapers, but if you look at the question, it actually says specifically for online newspapers. So if you talk about print newspapers, you're not going to get the maximum amount of marks possible. So the first part of this lesson is going to be talking about theorists. The second part will be talking about online newspapers specifically, and then we'll talk about how to write the question. So that's the format. By the way, this other bit here, and or social and participatory media, that's specifically talking about the Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites which are related to the Daily Mail and the Guardian, which I know you haven't gone through yet. But you will go through that when you start to look at the case studies in detail. Okay, so today's lesson is going to be quite a lot of note-taking for you. So we're going to look at two theorists, and these are the theorists which have been detailed in this particular question, Gerbner and Shirky. So I've print screened the pages from your theorist booklets. But what I think might be useful for you to do is if you have a look at the videos which I've embedded within this particular presentation. You need to go to YouTube. If you search for Mrs. Fisher, Clay Shirky Media End of Audience Theory, there is a 2.5-minute video where Mrs. Fisher talks through Clay Shirky's theory in really simple terms. It is reasonably easy. She is right. So if you go ahead and take some notes on Shirky's theory to start off with, and then there's this one here on Gerbner's theory. So that's the first part of the lesson today. Please have a look at these two theorists, Gerbner and Shirky. Focus on them both. Make sure your notes are detailed. And just a close-up of the notes from your theorist booklet. So pause the video here and get your notes on those two theorists done now. Okay, so we now need to talk about online papers, specifically the Mail Online and the Guardian Online. And we'll start with some macro information like we always should do with these questions, and then go into a little more micro detail. So, as you know, print news has been in decline for the past 20 years or so. So newspapers have gradually moved content online over the past 10 to 20 years. So all of your responses should start something like this. You should also know that online advertising is now more lucrative than print advertising. That means the Mail and the Guardian makes more money from advertising online than they do by selling advertising space in their newspapers. You should also know that there's a big difference between the Mail and the Guardian versus, for example, the Times and the Telegraph, who have paywalls. So that means that you can partially read some of their stories on the Times and Telegraph website, but if you want to read the whole story, you have to pay for it. Now, the Guardian and the Mail do not have paywalls, and therefore they depend on the adverts on their sites for revenue to keep that site open, so you can read it for free. And that'll become very important when we come to look at the sites in detail. When we think of the Guardian and the Mail, historically when we look at the newspapers, you should know that the Guardian is a left-wing liberal paper and the Mail is a right-wing, more conservative paper. However, when we look online, they have very similar audience demographics. The people who look at The Guardian online are very similar demographically to the audiences of the Mail online. And this could be to do with the proliferation of the internet and how easy it is to click on articles and read them very quickly on your phone or on your computer. But also it could be to do with the differences of the actual demographics of the Mail online and the Guardian online versus their print counterparts. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, let's have a little bit of a look at the Mail online in detail. And for this, you're going to have to open up a new tab and have a look at the Daily Mail's homepage. So if you go to dailymail.co.uk, you will see here the homepage of the Daily Mail. Now, I think this is just such a riot of information that you've got here. If we just look at a bit of detail, we have the Mail masthead here. So there's a familiar serif font, so people will be familiar with the news brand of the Mail, even though the Daily Mail online, the Mail Online is a different company to the Daily Mail, and they have different editors. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. This is obviously for today, so this is just before the 7 p.m. Announcement from the Prime Minister. So it's a lot about coronavirus. There's a lot of celebrity stuff here. We refer to this as the sidebar of shame, but it's got a pink masthead here and it says "Don't miss." By the way, just look at all the social, or the ability to share. This is very much part of the Daily Mail's MO. It's so easy to share these stories with people. And look at these comments. Look at the amount of shares as well. Shares 2,500, 3,000 comments and more. Anyway, we keep on going down and down and down. It's just a riot of colour, a riot of advertising as well. The sidebar of shame there obviously is going to be highly gossip-centric, highly celebrity-focused. There's so much information here, and it just keeps on going. Look at all of these stories. It's not concise in any way, shape or form. And one of the things that the Daily Mail says is that they want this site to be addictive. It's not necessarily about the quality of the stories, it's about how much time spent, because the more time spent on the site, the more adverts will be looked at. They can then charge more for their advertising, but it just keeps on going and going and going and going and going. So as I mentioned before, Mail Online is a separate company to the Daily Mail, and therefore together they can be seen to appeal to a different target audience, which enables DMGT, which is Daily Mail General Trust Group, to reach a wider market or wider audience across their combined print and online platforms. Generally speaking, it's more gossipy than political. It's more gossipy than their print brand, certainly. It does have a much younger demographic than its print counterpart. The Daily Mail print audience tends to be an older demographic, and it seems from our understanding that the demographic of the Daily Mail is much lower. It has an international audience, so although it's dailymail.co.uk, it does have quite a lot of traffic, that should be from the States. Each day, it produces 2,000 articles, 900 videos, 30,000 photographs every single day. The difference between the Daily Mail and print, and just in terms of the numbers, 2.5 million copies of the Daily Mail in print are sold daily. But online, there's nearly 15.5 million views and visits to the site. That includes the States, so I'll talk about that in a second, but that's a huge difference, 15.5 million views per day. Interestingly, considering the amount of content that is produced, they only have around 10 dealings with Ipso per week. Now, as you know, Ipso is the regulator, and given they produce 14,000 articles, it's pretty low, considering the reputation for the Mail to be sort of paparazzi-driven and a bit sharky with their approach to gossip. It does have a right-wing conservative agenda still, but it's more a celebrity and entertainment site rather than just hard news, and that's an interesting comparison to make when you're comparing against The Guardian. And most of the stories that are featured are personalized and focuses on individuals rather than collectives and societal issues. It's more about the individual person as opposed to groups of people. And let me just back that up with some numbers here and some interesting reading. So, interesting. Just look at the words here: a trailblazing global phenomenon. As the Mail describes itself, the success is down to editorial excellence, dynamic and engaging content, picture-led, easily navigable format, anytime, anywhere, on any device. Interesting, they say it's addictive content here, and I think that's really important to mention, that the Daily Mail or the Mail Online wants it to be addictive content, because the more time people can spend on the site, the more of a premium they can charge for their advertising. And for your information, on average 49 minutes on the site per month, which is rather a lot. And again, let's just talk about figures here. So this is the most up-to-date Daily Mail, Mail Online figures. So 24.9 million visitors per month. This is in the UK, I should mention, which is why there is a slight disparity between the 10.4 million daily versus the 15 million, which I mentioned before. The 15 million includes the US, but it's 10.4 million daily visits from the UK. There we go, 49 minutes per month. And then look at the different formats. So 70% of people look at the Daily Mail on their phones. The majority of the audience, or there's a slight tilt towards women. The average age is 45. Have a look at the profile here, ABC One, 62% ABC One. You often think of Daily Mail readers as being perhaps not a similar sort of reader to The Guardian, but online they're very similar. And the majority of their consumers are in that 18 to 44 bracket. Why do the Daily Mail audiences like it? Well, apparently it's a destination. People go directly to Mail or online for their information. Have a look at that. 65% of mums reached every month. I find that incredible, really. So that's the Daily Mail. So how about the Guardian Online? Well, let's have a look. Let's flick onto their homepage. Well, automatically we can see it's very similar to the print copy of the Guardian. They are owned by the Scott Trust and the Guardian Group, so we do have this crossover between, if you can see the quality within the journalism in the paper, we know that the quality in the journalism is going to be on the website as well, as evidenced by a similar layout to the paper. There's obviously rolling news of the coronavirus crisis. Interestingly, everything that you see which is yellow here is to do with supporting the Guardian. So whether to do with subscribe or contribute, this is a large part of how they make their revenue. You'll see there's a lot. There's fewer adverts on this page because they make a lot of their revenue through direct donations from their readership. Look at the sort of stories that are being presented here. Obviously, it's about the lockdown as well, but there's a lot. There's not as much celebrity or entertainment. It's not as gossipy, and certainly it's a lot cleaner, in my opinion, to navigate the sport there. Although there's no sport going on at the moment, there's a fair amount of interactivity, and then a lot of around the world stories. So this seems to be a more culturally robust production than perhaps the Daily Mail would be, still talking about food and still talking about films despite the lockdown. So a little bit more about the Guardian Online for you then. So about 24 million UK monthly users, which is very similar in terms of the numbers to the Daily Mail. The age brackets, the majority of people are 35 plus, but there's a significant minority in the 15 to 34-year-old category, a third of people. It has a younger audience, so it can, so the company can reach a greater audience, and also an ABC One educated, culturally aware audience, very similar to the Mail's. Okay, so Lots of notes there for you to be aware of, an appreciation of the Guardian Online and the Mail Online, and your theorist notes which you've pulled together. So pull those notes together, put it in a new blog spot or write it down, send it to your teachers when you're done. Any problems, drop them a line. Good luck.